Hello and welcome. My name is Jordan Kelly, Content Director over here at Brand Storytelling, and I have the pleasure today of speaking with Robert Burroughs, Executive Creative Director and Principal over at Mammal Motion Design and Animation Studio. Robert, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am really curious, interested, and fascinated by your work. I had the privilege of meeting you at one of our events, Brand Storytelling 2024, where I was then introduced to some of what you do. And I gotta say, I think that it's a really interesting piece of the storytelling framework that goes into building out the holistic experience that we have when we engage with stories, with documentary, with brand stories. And I'd love it if you'd elaborate on that today. We'll start by asking you about your background in motion design and animation. Where did you get your start? And even before getting your start, what drove your curiosity on that front?
Well, I've always been creative, so all through high school, I was always in the art room, beginning, end, class, at lunchtime, whenever I could be there. And I had a cousin that was doing graphic design and was able to kind of see that as a viable career, being creative. And so that was kind of the beginning path of like, what can I do to not be the starving artist? Because that was the big fear. Of my parents, just you got to figure something out. Um, so that's the genesis of it, is wanting to, eat, have shelter. And so I went into design once I got into college. And the program that I was in was very much just design. So that's my background, is typography, composition, not so much animation and motion design. It was really the fundamentals that I learned there. It was only after college that I pursued animation and motion graphics quite heavily. I mean, that's what I wanted to do as I was graduating, and was pretty certain. Yeah.
How much do you feel like you draw from that fundamental education in the work you do today, or do you feel like there was a large leap from that into motion design and animation? I know that for some people, they share that same art bug or that itch that you describe having early, and may not know how to get from A to B. And I'm curious, did you employ a lot of those foundational teachings, or was there more to do to get to the motion design and animation portion?
Yes, I found quickly and soon that if I made really beautiful designs with really beautiful typography and composition, I didn't have to be the best animator because it just looked good on screen, and could play with that and use that for a long time. And still, sometimes when things are tight, I know that if we make it a beautiful frame, then the animation doesn't have to do a lot of the lift for it to get the information across and just feel right and beautiful. So that's how the design fundamentals kind of helped me along into this career. So I could just make really great frames, and then as time went by and I started learning the craft and understanding 3D, I really dove into the technical side of it for quite some time, nerding out and figuring out how to do this, that, and the other in Cinema 4D and After Effects. And then now I really have gone back to the fundamentals of concept and design and overall art direction, where so much of the program for my school really was that. So kind of gone all the way back to the beginning in a sense, with a broad understanding of how things work, and the ability to talk to animators and designers, and understanding the right way to wave my hands to get things across. And there's a wide variety of onomatopoeias that I rely on as well. So to answer your question, yes, it's carried through. That understanding and that education has stayed with me. unlike a lot of folks who go to school and then find themselves in a career that has nothing to do with it, I'm fortunate enough to where like I had a foundation that I could rely on as I got my career going.
So you've discussed this part. There's the artistic piece, there's the design piece, there's the sort of structural portion, knowing the rules, knowing how to speak the language. And I think that people might see what they think is represented out there in the world by those ideas, and maybe not even necessarily directly correlate those actions with storytelling. But you and I know that those are really deeply intertwined. And I think that I'm curious. I want to know, where do you think those meet? What is how is good motion design and good animation representative of story? How do you bring that to a project, and what does it do to fill out and amplify or be a lens for the stories that they're attached to?
So I think there's multiple ways. One way we're discovering and working in currently at Mammal is helping tell the parts of a story where there is lack of archival footage or the emotional interpersonal parts of a story, and even on to more of the abstract kind of concepts and thought that you can do with animation, with the assistance of an interview. And we've done that with different explainers, that you can take it in something that's complex, put an image and an animation to it, and suddenly you're hearing and seeing at the same time. And so the concept of things is a lot easier to understand. Um, and as far as the emotional part, there's so much that you can rely on that breaks down the psychology of things, that with a lot of things with brands and stuff, there's just the access to actors that can really pull that off in the time frame. Is a bit difficult to make happen. And really, the reenactment thing is not often well done. So we find that doing our piece, doing the animation to help the story along, elevates it in a way that maybe a live production couldn't.
So in other words, you, through motion design and animation, have found this way to bring pieces of stories to life that would otherwise kind of only exist in the imagination and need to be rendered for the screen, right? Like
Yes.
these moments that, right, they couldn't be captured in the field, or they happened in the past, or they're representing I imagine that there's some instances of maybe somebody's telling a story and they want an accompanying visual rather than just sitting on somebody's face while they tell a story. These are just a few of the many places where you apply your craft.
Right. Yeah, I mean, throwing a really beautiful illustration or animation along with someone speaking, um, levels the whole thing up and pulls in something that, again, what you're just saying, a talking head just isn't going to be able to do. Yeah.
What kind of stories um, get you excited about um, sort of meeting them with your work? Like what kind of stories do you like? What kind of stories do you find yourself looking at and going like, well, this would be a great place to do X, Y, and Z?
So much of the way I work is coming alongside directors and brands and trying to unpack the story they want to tell. And oftentimes, if it's interesting, it has a hook, there's some heart to it, I can get on board. And, if it's got a strong concept, that's the kind of stories I like. When it's not that, when it's just weak and there's nothing that really grabs people, and even me, then I think those are the stories I want to avoid. So it's not so much that I prefer working on one story or, you know, um, piece over another. It's more of a what's not going to work. Where am I not? Where is there no value for me to add?
Interesting. So there really is this sort of central idea about being additive, bringing value, and to your point about stories with heart, I think that's something that stands out to me because we are in a moment right now where many brands, many documentarians are all focused on communicating um, some rich, real ideas that do connect in that way. Brands, especially, have really pivoted their focus to communicating their own internal values and to communicating their ethos, their purpose. These are really, really important facets in brand storytelling right now. Do you see that in work that you're doing with brands? And when you do, does that sort of catalyze the process even further when it comes to delivering with and for them?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if a brand is done the work and understands their mission, their vision, which a lot of the brands of brand storytelling that these are major brands, then we know where we are, we know what we're trying to achieve, and it's helping them portray their ethos, their values in a way that's not pushing the brand or trying to sell something. It's just we're putting this in the world because this is how we see the world and want the world to be. And that's really amazing. And it's remarkable that this is happening more and more and more. It's far more interesting than the general advertising and promo space that I've worked in for years. This is way more just the connections there. It's not just screaming at you, buy, and or watch this, watch this, watch this. It's hey, we're coming alongside you, and this is how we see the world. This is how we want you to see the world, and we're putting it out there as it's almost like it's goodwill. It's almost this kind of it really is kind of a goodwill move from the brands. It's just like this is really something we feel like needs to be in the world. These are stories that need to be told, regardless of whether it drives uh, consumption or not.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Um, so thus far we've discussed the origins of your journey, the work you like to do, where you like to connect, but I don't want to paint a picture that you're like one man alone doing all this.
Absolutely
So
not.
let's definitely talk about Mammal. What does your team look like, and how do the members of that team empower one another to bring the projects that you work on for brands and for filmmakers to completion?
So one of the things that kind of early on in starting the company was I did the thing of well, it started out as really me and bringing people in to help. And so much of it was this person does this project and person does this project. And there was a certain moment where I'm like, well, if I were coming to me and I realized that that's what's going on, aside from having a producer, maybe I should just get a freelancer and save some money. Right. And so that was like dawned on me. And then, so really what I've pushed here is no one works alone on a project. And even if it's a smaller project where it doesn't need two or three people to be hands on, I've kind of started doing this buddy system so that another creative, even on a smaller project, knows what's going on with it and allows the person that's hands on to bounce ideas off of them. They understand everything that's going on conceptually, they understand the project, and it's so much better when there's someone else involved. When concepts coming in and we're trying to figure something out, it's it's all of us sitting down and throwing out ideas, seeing what sticks, what's working, what aligns with the creative brief that we're doing. So I've really pushed collaboration here, and I've hired a couple of producers over the last year, and they they comment on how everyone's in it together, and um, there's not a lot of like ego. I've got enough ego for all of us, so it's good. It's good that the team, doesn't, because it would be chaos. But I mean, in all seriousness, there's a lot of like what works best, and when you understand what you're doing and understand what needs to be done for the concept for the project, then it's not about what you want and what your ego wants and what you think's best. It's going back to that creative brief, and you have two or three ideas. And a lot of times you just kind of go back through and you're like, it doesn't hit this, it doesn't hit this, it doesn't hit that. Great idea, not for this. When it starts hitting all the things, then it's like, cool, do we build on that, or are we good? And that removes that whole part and allows the collaboration to continue. So I almost kind of like just call us like a Voltron. It's like this single entity, and that's why we've rebranded as Mammal. It's this single kind of beast that we all come together and make and are a part of, rather than being individuals with our own goals and things for the projects.
That's super, super interesting. Because I think that again, for people who don't see the behind the scenes of this, they may not be 100% clear on who needs to be involved, what it takes to be involved. This idea that you have collaborators that are producers, that not everybody that works directly with you shares the immediate same background as you. I think it really sheds light on this idea that this facet of storytelling is holistic in its creation, that there's really these multiple parts that have to come together. I love your imagery there on the Voltron. Yeah, everybody's got to come together and be the beast that gets it done. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. um and I want to expand on that in terms of this collaboration bit. Is like, okay, so you are exercising this what sounds like this great model for collaboration within your own organization, and then you have to take that out into the world and sort of apply a lot of those same philosophies to clients, right? So I mean, let's talk about brands, for example. There are brands that have tried and often not succeeded to execute on all of the storytelling ideas that they have internally. And the reason, we know, we've seen it time and time again, the reason that more often than not doesn't work is because when they try to get it all done internally, the infrastructure doesn't exist for that, right? So they need people who focus on and specialize in certain tactics, certain ideas, certain modes of communication and creativity. And Mammal sounds like a really solid plug and play version of that a brand could tap to employ for this process. But to that end, there still has to be the extension of that collaboration bit with them. So my question for you is, across different brands who have different identities and different stories that they want to communicate, what is the common thread you bring to them on that collaboration piece? How do you work with them to realize their vision regardless of what that vision is?
So I kind of run things in that sense a bit like an agency model, unlike other motion graphics and animation studios. So I really like to sit down and do a discovery phase, and that can be a kickoff call, and really unpack the brief, ask a bunch of questions, and try to. I mean, there's projects sometimes where I feel like I walk away knowing more about their brand strategy than the folks that I've been talking to on the phone, because I get all this information, we get all this information, and we're just digesting it. And what we do is along the way is that first step is what I call discovery. And then there's just the alignment phase where we basically go back to the client and mirror back what we heard. And and we do that kind of throughout the process so that we are always on track with what they're trying to do, and we don't get, like I was saying earlier, we don't get lost in our own ego and this is what we like and this would be cool. It's always trying to align back with them, and and so that makes them a part of the process. I've got a no surprise policy. I like the brands to be aware and on board and seeing everything. The big reveal is great on The Price is Right, but not in our industry. So I'd like them to be along for the ride. And that allows them to get that part, like you were saying, the internal piece where they're trying to do it internally. They get to scratch that itch of being involved without all the pressures, because they have their day-to-day things that they were hired to, and then suddenly we're going to tell this story, which, you know, great. And I've actually had conversations where they, you know, for an animator, they'll bring an animator that's got a 9 to 5 for them, and they want them to do this explainer, and it's kind of in between the other projects, and so it takes forever. And that usually that person gets siloed because it is between a bunch of other things. So when you're an animator, and I've been there, and a designer, and you are working between other projects, well, the people that you need to get in front of are also working on other projects. And so that feedback is slow. And look, when we schedule meetings to go over things, those meetings happen. When you're internal and you schedule a meeting, it might not. And this happens here. I mean, this is not just, I'm not pointing the finger. I mean, there are things here where it's like, we want to do this, we want to do that for us, but then there's other projects that keep us going, or, you know, that they get in the way of that. So to answer your question, we come alongside, and we're not just, we're not taking away from that part of the joy of that job, because so much of what we do is fun and interesting, and people want to be involved, and we allow them to do that and collaborate, and without all the stress of trying to figure it out, and timelines just getting pushed and pushed and pushed.
So tell me if I'm right here. To put it another way, you're able to take what might otherwise be this really daunting thing that kind of gums up their own internal systems off their plate without making them feel left out, without taking it away from them,
Yeah,
because that doesn't ever quite work either, right? Especially when we're discussing brands. Brands have an imperative that says that they need to be, protective of the brand and the message and the story that they want to make. And so it makes sense that they need to be very closely involved, but you free them up to move about their traditional operations and have these touch points with them. That's right.
correct.
Cool.
Yeah, and oftentimes, you know, when you work for a company, when you're in a brand, I've been in larger companies myself, you start to develop this identity for the brand that may not actually align with the larger picture and vision. I've come across that so often when you're having a conversation, and then you start getting the brief, you start understanding what's going on a little bit more. And, you know, it's kind of like steering things back into that. Uh, I mean, you know, it's like you get lost in the weeds, and then suddenly it's like, But this is what we're trying to do, right? This is what you're trying to do for the brand, and it's that light bulb goes off, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm like, your mission statement's this, and why don't we push that a little bit into it? The idea, the concept is all there, but what if we pull that in? To your point earlier, the ethos, the overall vibe of what we're trying to do, it just gets lost in the day to day. And so pretty often when working with brands, we're able to kind of remind them, maybe not the best word, but kind of like pull ideas out of something that they're so used to seeing that it's not fresh and inspiring to them anymore.
It's kind of like you hold the mirror up to them, right? Like,
Yes.
and you let them look at themselves, and maybe in a little bit of a different way. And I like your point, this idea that they kind of go, oh yeah, that is the thing that's been at the center of this for so long that we may have
Mm-hmm.
lost sight of that in this immediate moment. But that's really, really interesting. I wonder, do you feel that that process is goes the same way with filmmakers and documentarians, or do you feel like there's a different piece to it for any particular reason?
It's similar in a lot of ways. It's that we do the same thing. We come alongside them. We engage. We try to figure out the overall purpose, the emotion of the project, understand the concept, and we do the same thing. We pull it all together and we mirror back to them what we heard. It's different in the sense that a director and filmmaker knows exactly more or less exactly what they're going after versus brands like we want this, we want that. By the time a filmmaker is involved, a lot of times they're between us and the brand, and so a lot of that piece is figured out, and so the director's got a vision. They know what they're looking for, and then what I do in the team is is make that happen. And in the most effective way um, possible from our side. And as long as we're doing that, um, as long as we're doing that, then the director's marching and pushing along and getting what they need in all the other places. And then it's just kind of a checking in with us to make sure it's working until we get to like a rough cut and we start plugging things in. And then it's just like nuance. But it's like by that time they understand the footage they've gotten. They understand, especially with documentaries, it's that the story that they want to weave and tell is much more fluid than a scripted piece. And so they really need someone to be in the trenches and to really understand the vibe that's going throughout the piece, regardless of how things weave with interviews and whatnot. And we do that. There's something we're working on right now where they came to us and right off the bat, they're like, we've got a bunch of different pieces of footage from way like from the 90s that look, that kind of like camcorder to some more modern interviews. And they're like, we need a graphic design animation system that holds this thing visually together. Um, and so when we understand that that's our project, that's what we're doing, and we understand what the overall vibe is, that's when we get to work. And then it's just like checking in and checking in and checking in. So it's not that different from working with a brand so much as that it just I like working with directors quite a bit. They have a creative sense, and when it's a really good partnership, it becomes more collaborative, and there's that trust of we're going to give this a shot. What if we do this? And it becomes more of a like an improvisational game where it's yes and versus the no but. And that's the difference with directors is it's easier for me to get in and have those conversations and get that place. Whereas brands, there's just the it's a more complex organism, and so it's hard to like. There's a lot of people weighing in, so to speak.
It
But
sounds
I
like
just went off on a tangent. Hopefully that all makes sense.
oh, absolutely. In fact, you brought me to another idea that we kind of already touched on, which is this idea that this is why it's so important for brands to collaborate with specialists, right? Is that the brand has to be the keeper of the brand ethos and of so many other things that when it comes to implementing story, it seems expressly important that they work with specialists who, as we previously mentioned, as you previously mentioned, have the bandwidth and the opportunity to have these touch points, but then walk away and work on it, and then bring it back for a look, and then walk away and work on it, et cetera, et cetera. The point here being that this is why it's important for brands not just to to work with you but to work with directors as well, because a director, as you mentioned, can help bridge the gap on those communication points. If there's sort of a trickle down effect where a brand has gone out and found a director that they know is a great select for the story that they want to tell, right? They've used their brand resources to do research, field conversations with various directors, and then they boil that down to somebody that they know they can put their trust in to communicate their brand purpose, their ethos, their mission, what have you. And if that person becomes the person that is responsible for speaking with you, the brand has saved themselves time, they have saved themselves energy, and they have raised the odds of output reflecting their original goal, right? Which I think is something that um, brands can struggle with, is this thing where people get together, they go, I want this desired outcome. That sounds great. They may not always have the tools internally to put the pieces together on where to start in order to meet that end goal. Because the reality of the situation is when you're trained in something, when you're good at something because you've trained in it and it's your specialty, that is how you can ultimately arrive at the results you want. And when brand marketers go, I want a film, there needs to be a modicum of recognition on the part of those individuals that says, but I am a brand marketer, I am not a filmmaker. And so let me communicate my brand marketing ideals to a filmmaker. Let me have that filmmaker communicate what the additional points that they need to a motion designer and animator. And then suddenly you have this incredible pipeline that results in, well, you need a couple other pieces. You need that person who can talk to them about the distribution piece, and you need that person that can talk to them about the marketing piece. That may come from internally, but it may be somebody different as well, because let's face it, marketing a story is different than placing an ad. So all of these, to amplify kind of what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to amplify this idea that like it is important for brands to surround themselves with the most talented people for every facet of a story that they want to tell. And you occupy one of those pieces by being so dedicated to this portion of your craft that ultimately, who could be mad in the end when they've brought in each of these individual parts and had all those people executing on those parts in their own time and on their own, and then bringing the final result back to the brand so that they can go, yes, yes, this is it. That wasn't quite a question. It was it was more of a comment.
No, but you touched upon something that the word trust, and that you know the that's the conduit between the brand, the director, or the brand and us is trust. So they pick someone to work with. That's not just the aesthetic they can achieve. It's not just the work they have done. Trust is a whole other piece, because so many times when you're working with someone at a major brand on that marketing team on a project of the size of these projects, their they need to know that you are going to deliver and they're going to look good, right? But also not get in a position to where they start to worry about their security in their own position. And it's the same thing. It's when we work with a director, it's they put trust in us to deliver and to if things do go off track, they trust that we are going to have that conversation and steer us back into the right place. And that is, I think you said the other ingredients, but I think that so often uh, what a lot of younger designers and animators and filmmakers they don't realize how much more important that is than some of the other pieces. If you're not reliable or people don't feel like you've got their back, you're real and all the things you've done that are so beautiful um, only gets you so far.
Well, you have walked us both right up to the last thing that I wanted to ask you today, which is, and what you just said is a great piece of this answer already. And so I'm wondering, uh, is there anything else that you would impart upon those who are just looking for, a nugget of wisdom here, that you can pull from your collective experience working with all the different kinds of clients that you work with, um, especially and specifically when it comes to just making great storytelling. It sounds to me like in part you've already answered that. It's this idea of trust. People have to know that they can trust you. No matter how good your work looks, they need to know that they can rely on you, that they can lean on you, and that you're going to deliver. Is there anything else that you would add, that as sort of a core tenet for finding success in this space?
um, I think consuming content that feeds the soul and feeds that interest is very important. And be fluid, like be open to things that the opportunities that come your way. You don't have to take all of them, but I think entertain them seriously before you say no, or unlike me, I just said yes to everything all the time, and burnt myself out. So I don't recommend that. But entertain ideas, entertain like opportunities that come your way. Seriously, entertain them and think it through before you just go. That's not what I want to do, because maybe it is what you want to do. You just don't know it yet.
Well, I know that your clients are grateful to you for working through that crucible, through that process, and developing your skill set to the place that you have, as they've benefited plenty from that. And I'm grateful to you for the same, so that we're able to have this really interesting and insightful, creative conversation today. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate that. Uh, Please go ahead and let us know where, or let the folks watching know where they can find you, where they can connect with you, and if you've got anything going on, feel free to share.
Yeah, we can look at our work at mammal.agency. And there's a lot of work to unpack. We put a lot of work into various case studies to try to break it down into the thinking behind it, especially on larger pieces. So there's quite a bit there, and reach out. I clearly love just rambling on about these things.
Well, so do we, Robert. Hey, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thanks, Jordan. Thank you for your time.